Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei left high-class family to be harem master part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the xDoug-Dimmadome-x for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Let's start this video. Issei Hyoudou was currently sitting in his large enclosure. It was like at the zoo, but much larger, and it was enclosed. He was sitting on a rock, looking around said enclosure with his hands over his eyes. 31. 32. Ready or not, here I come! Issei yelled out, removing the hand from his eyes. He looked around and saw nothing but dense jungle and a metal ceiling. He got up from his rock and began to move into the jungle, looking behind every tree. Unknown to him, 5 pairs of eyes were looking right at him. Reptilian eyes, golden color. They were slitted and they were looking right at Issei. They began to move through the jungle, silently like a jungle cat, stalking their prey. Issei quickly opened up a bush, on his way back to the middle as he was going in a circle. Ha! He cried, as if he found them. He then frowned, going back into the middle. It was then several flashes of black, gray, and green came from all sides and he was tackled to the floor. Aya! Issei yelled out, a yelp from the pain of slamming into the rock. When his vision, which went kind of fuzzy after the brutal slam, he looked up and noticed that 5 raptors, the size of 2 chickens, were clinging to him with their around his forearms and his ankles. They were biting down on him and it looked like an attack to kill, but if anyone paid any close attention, there was no blood or anything. It was a play attack. They were also all on his chest and stomach, holding onto his body. Issei squirmed under their attack, but they didn't dislodge from his body. Damn it, get off me you fatties! Issei complained. You guys are getting too heavy! Issei yelled, but none of his complaining removed them either. It was then he felt the ground shake, and when he looked behind him, his eyes went wide. No, not you! No, you are definitely too heavy! Behind him was a Trex, about 8 feet tall and 25 feet in length. Its massive bellowing roar came and scared off the raptors. It was then the Trex grabbed Issei by its and lifted him up. Okay, this isn't any better. Your breath stinks. Issei complained, gagging from the smell. The Trex snorted, obviously laughing at Issei, but it also caused more stench to rise up. Issei quickly faked passing out from the smell, only for another massive shaking of the ground to appear. Issei quickly woke up and saw his Spinosaurus come into view. It ran into the Trex and sent the Trex to the ground, only for the Trex to whine from the headbutt though it stood up. It was then the Spinosaurus, which was 10 feet tall and 32 feet in length, picked up Issei in its massive clawed hands and roared in its face. Gah! You stink too! You smell like fish and meat! He smells like rotting meat. Dang it, you both stink! Issei complained, only to be tossed from the Spino into the soft bushes nearby, which became a cushion. Issei groaned and stood up, only for the raptors to surround him again. Hey, no! No! Last time you did this, I slammed into the rock hard. They continued to approach him, obviously not caring for his words. Oh, so you think because there is a bush behind me it's okay? No, it's not okay. Stop it! Issei complained, running away from the raptors which chased him. The Rex was watching from afar, watching the boy run away from the Dinosaurus. The Spino was laying on its belly, watching as well. It was then the doors opened to the massive enclosure, and 2 smiling faces appeared. A male and a female. Dear, it's time for dinner. Ah, Mom! Can't I stay and play some more? Maybe after dinner. They will be here when you get back. Ah, okay, Mom. Issei said, running back into the house. Issei Hyoudou was a boy of 11, who had chocolate brown hair and chocolate eyes. He was the son of 2 devils from the extra demon house of Hyoudou. The Hyoudou family did not directly work with the underworld government, but they didn't exactly cut all ties either. As a member of Hyoudou, they had the power of bombs. Yes, their power was explosions. It was similar to the power of destruction that Baal had, but it was on a wider scale though less powerful, of course. They were a very strong house, if only they weren't so small. The only 3 Hyoudous were Issei and his parents, though his mother was not a Hyoudou to begin with, of course. The Hyoudou family had a very interesting occupation though. They were scientists. To be more specific, they worked in Tokyo and the underworld as geneticists. In Tokyo, they were unlocking the hidden past of the human body and making stronger white blood cells, so bodies heal faster. In the underworld though, they worked selfishly. Issei Hyoudou was born a healthy baby, but due to not being in a house of the 72 pillars and especially from being an extra demon, He was often picked on and treated unfairly, as is devil culture. So, as loving parents, they turned to their work to help their son. They had secretly brought back extinct animals, more known as dinosaurs. Yes, they used their own work to create and bring back to life animals that lived on Earth many years ago. And from a young age, Issei and the dinosaurs spent life together, so they grew up together, and they formed a bond. While they were creatures of instinct and very dangerous, the two parents felt confident in leaving their son in the care of the carnivores. Issei was walking into the enclosure of the dinosaurs and walked into the middle. It was then he was pounced on by a fully grown raptor, the alpha of the 4 raptors. Issei yelped in pain as he fell onto the hard ground, his eyes wide as he stared up into the face of the large raptor. He looked down and spotted the 15-inch claw, razor sharp and ready to spring into action to slice him up. Issei gulped and heard the call of the raptor on him, who yelped out into the air. Suddenly 3 other raptors appeared and they walked towards Issei hunched like they were ready to pounce. Issei finally felt fear enter his veins and his eyes were wide. He opened his to scream, and just as he let out his voice to scream for his parents, he was attacked. The 4 raptors quickly attacked his face with their long rough tongues, licking him playfully. He quit his yell immediately, and began to thrash under the weight of the alpha and under the attack of the 4 smelly tongues. His parents had quickly ran into the enclosure with stun guns and tranks as they heard their young 11-year-old son scream for help, but were relieved to only see that he was just being licked to death. They were very amazed that in such a short time since Issei has been away, these creatures were already fully grown. It was then loud footsteps and the quake of the earth was felt, and out of the tree line came the T-Rex and Spino from opposite ends of the clearing. They roared at each other, as they were already fully grown as well. They quickly ran at each other, jaws snapping as the Spinosaurus was first to strike, clamping down on the back of the Rex, before twisting his head and slamming the Rex onto his side. With this win and act of dominance, the Spino scared off the raptors and picked up Issei before putting him into his large crocodilian, hiding him completely inside his before shaking around and throwing him into the large pool of water that was newly installed. While there was drinking water with small creeks and rivers in the enclosure, the pond was installed for Issei's benefit and for a good bathing/relaxing for the dinosaurs. The Rex whimpered and stood up from the fall before shaking his head. He was bleeding a bit on his back, but it was healing up quick due to his parents giving him a very unique gene, though it was apparent in each dinosaur. They gave them a DNA gene of a phoenix, granting them quick healing powers, though it wasn't nearly as powerful as the phoenix itself. But it did act as a substitute for a phoenix tear if given enough time, generally 10 to 30 seconds, the healing begins. The Rex walked around the enclosure before laying down on his side for a nap on a large smooth rock. The Spino moved into the pond area, taking his nap underwater once Issei left. Issei was now stuck with the 5 rambunctious raptors, who were playing hide and seek with Issei, though the raptors won very quickly and were always hard to find. They blended in very well, due to their own genes. Issei's parents were very smart geneticists who gave these dinosaurs even stronger abilities, making them even more potent than they were before. The raptors were all dark brown bodies, with skin like a crocodile without the overabundance of scales. Well, to be more precise, the skin was a normal skin which was just stronger skin than those of a human's. Underneath the skin was fat. It was fat meant for insulation for the winter, and they were also good in the summer to keep heat out. Underneath the fat was a layer of armor, like a croc's or a gator's skin. This armor was located on their backs and along the spinal cord. The genes provided for these creatures was crocs for the tough armor along their backs. They were given the gene of a black jaguar for their quiet footsteps for hunting their prey. The Rex was a large sandy-colored creature with green eyes. The T-Rex had genes for a sort of armor, but it was given the genes of the horned lizards, the thorny devil. With this, his back was covered in all sorts of spikes and up his spinal cord. The Rex also had a much more poisonous bite than before. Normally, their bites were poisonous with bacteria, but they took a step further. They added the genes of the oleander plant, which is known to be the most toxic plant in the world. It can kill within minutes, though it's mostly dangerous to children and the ill, but adult humans have to survive the first 24 hours and there is no antidote. But there is treatment for it. Must be treated quickly. It attacks the gastrointestinal system, which causes massive stomach cramps among other problems. It also attacks the heart and the central nervous system, causing irregular heartbeat and sometimes comas. The Spinosaurus also got an armor upgrade, but only for his spine. It was the gene of the turtle. The reason the Spino did not get an upgrade to more of his armor was due to the fact that the Phoenix gene was stronger in him than the others. He was also given the genes of the gorilla, giving it superb control over his hands and fingers, enabling him to use it extremely well. He was also given the gene of the platypus, so the claws on his hands and feet produce a poison, which was amped up of course. It's not lethal but can be debilitating if left alone. They all share genes as well. The pit viper for heat vision, allowing them to switch between normal and infrared vision, allowing them to hunt easily. The two larger predators were given the genes of the raptors, giving them heightened intelligence. While the Spinosaurus was obviously the king of the rest of the dinos, there was only one alpha male of the raptors. Spino preferred to hunt alone. They all shared the genes of the birds of prey, raptors. They had increased vision which gave them the vision to see things more clearly, and to see farther out. The parents were happy to see their kid run for their life, so they returned to the command center, where they overlooked the computers and monitors which monitored the habitat and the dinosaurs. When they entered, they were both looking at the same computer, which was a devil power monitor. They installed it because when Issei was first brought home from the hospital, his devil power surged when he cried, which destroyed several windows and glasses. It hadn't spiked from there then onwards, and the doctors looked at him, and they said they don't know what caused it. His demonic powers were extremely low. Now though, the monitor was showing demonic powers which was rising heavily in the habitat, circling all around Issei. He wasn't forcing his power outwards, but they detected it from within. They had planted a chip inside of him for medical purposes. Is this monitor right? How is this possible? His father asked. I don't know. This can't be right. He's showing signs of a demonic power equaling a super devil. Equaling Serzek's demonic strength. His mother said. What do we do about this? Should we tell Serzek about this? We do meet up with him every week for tea. He has been very interested in what we do for the community ever since he found out about it. I think we should, but I think we shouldn't tell him everything. Just let him know that our son is a strong demon. If word was found out that he was a super devil, his chances in life would diminish for growth. Yes, of course. What time is it? His mother asked. It's oh crap, it's time. We are late for meeting with Serzek. His father screeched. Okay, let's get Issei. I think he should come with us from now on. We were talking about play dates. Fine. Hurry up. We gotta go. His mother quickly left the room and went into the habitat, and a few minutes later, Issei arrived. Do I have to go? I don't want to have a play date. Issei whined. His father rolled his eyes. You need to get out more and make friends. I have friends, Dad. Those dinosaurs cannot be your only friends. You need to have some devil friends. Hey, you are going to meet with the king devil. You should feel honored. Only a few get to do this. Issei blinked and looked up at him. Really? I get to meet Serzek? His father grinned. That's right. We have met up with Serzek for the last few years talking about our research. Of course the dinosaurs are a secret, Issei, so make sure that stays so. Issei nodded rapidly. Wow. I get to meet with the king. Okay, let's go. Issei said, eager. Yes, dear. His mother said, chuckling as they transported using the magic circle. After a few minutes, Issei was in another room with two young women, both 12. One was a long-haired redhead named Rias, while the other was a long-haired brunette named Akino. They were both really pretty, and Issei was slightly flushed from being in close proximity with these two girls. The two girls giggled as they dragged Issei off to the main bedroom in the mansion, taking him to go play. The parents of both Issei and the brother of Rias were sitting in the main living room. They were drinking tea with the white-haired female, Grafia, who was the maid. So, you seem to have something urgent to talk with me about. Serzek commented. Issei's parents nodded. Yes, there is something with our son. His mother said. Our son is showing signs of being a very strong devil. His father said proudly. We were monitoring him today, and his demonic power had grown significantly. While I'm sure he doesn't know how to use it, his power to blow stuff up will be amazing. Really? Well, I am glad to hear it. Serzek said with a smile. So, is your son okay with the playdates with Rias and Akino? I think my dear sister's friend is quite of a sadistic one, the father chuckled. He was very eager to meet you, and I told him I thought it was good for him to get some friends. So, I think as long as he gets to talk to you, Serzek, he is okay with this. Plus, I think he has a crush on those two girls already. His father said with a jealous sigh. His mother slapped him in the chest. What are you sighing about? You have me, don't you? Or are you saying it's because he has two women? I wasn't saying anything, dear. I swear. His father said, rubbing his chest. His mother said, not believing him. Serzek laughed a bit. I'm very glad to see you two are still married after all these years. So, how is the research going? Upstairs, Rias and Akino had Issei in a dress with makeup on. He looked very unhappy now, but he was being held down by the two older women. Okay, well, Akino held him down while Rias applied the makeup. Issei also had his duct tape closed so he couldn't scream for help, though he did make muffled noises. Doesn't he look so adorable? Akino said, smiling evilly. Very adorable, Rias said. Cutest boy I know. Issei growled out them and said something, like I hate you, but they smiled. Ah, I love you too, the two women said simultaneously. Issei growled out and began to rock in Akino's arms, trying to escape. The two women laughed and continued their evil assault as Rias began to do his hair. An hour later. Well, it was great having this talk again, Mr. and Ms. Hyoudou, xDoug said. I will see you again tomorrow if that's okay? I think we should definitely meet up more often as friends. The two parents nodded. Absolutely. Our research is going very well, so we can take some more breaks. Thank you for the invite, Issei. It's time to go home, his mother called out. They heard some crashing above before the thumping of man's steps on the stairs. The two parents, xDoug and Grafia, were stunned at the vision before them. Issei was in a dress and makeup, with curls in his brown hair. His eyes were angry. Don't ask, Issei said, standing next to his parents who were trying to stifle a laugh. They teleported out of the house quickly. When Rias and Akino came back, all four of them let out laughter, all enjoying the torment of the poor boy. Back home, his father was laughing at Issei, who was not happy at all. It's not funny. That's not how I see it. Ahahaha. His father was leaning against the kitchen counter, trying to calm down. It was then his mother, while stifling some laughter, was poking her husband in the side. Come on, dear, his mother snorted. It's not funny. Snort. We should show some respect. Of course. His father said, calming down, though he snorted a bit too in laughter. Well, sorry to say this, Issei, we are going again tomorrow. Years have passed since Issei met up with Rias and Akino. He had gotten to know Kiba and Kaneko very well during their young years. He met Kaneko and she was very emotionless, and only through him, Rias and Akino, was she able to act out more. In fact, she had developed a crush on the boy, though Issei never knew. Typical, right? Typical boy never realizes that girls like him. So, three hot devil babes like Issei and he never gets it, even though Kaneko sits on his lap and the other two girls smother him by hanging off of him. He thought they were just being possessive, especially Kaneko. Oh? You would like some sort of story that involved Issei and Kaneko? Okay. 2 years ago, Issei was playing in the sandbox with Kaneko, who was not as emotionless as before, but wasn't emotional either. She was in a very interesting state of mind where anything would push her back the way she came or forward towards being more normal. The group of 5 were at the park now: Kiba, Kaneko, Rias, Akino, and Issei. They were the only ones there at the park at 2 o'clock in the spring. It wasn't hot or cold, but it was warm with a gentle breeze. The leaves were finally coming back to life and the sakura blossoms were finally in season, showing off the brilliant pink. Absolutely stunning. Issei had gotten over the event where he was forced into a dress, though it took him a month of not trusting the two ladies. After about a month, he got more comfortable hanging around the females and began to treat them like one of the guys. He liked the two girls a lot, as best friends, though he never forgot his bestest friends back home. Issei, Akino and Rias were so close, they actually took baths together, all innocent fun. Well, innocent for Issei. Akino and Rias were quite knowledgeable in the more adult ways, but Issei was obviously very innocent. This was to be expected. So Issei did get along with everyone, but the situation with the dinos was different. Back home, Issei did not hang out as much with the dinos, like he would do for 12 hours a day. Since he made new friends, he spent less and less time with them, but they didn't hate him for it. In fact, Issei had begun to sleep with them in the enclosure, snuggling up to the raptors or the spino, sleeping using one of their soft squishy parts, most likely the tails or the stomach. So, he did spend quality time with everyone and his parents were very happy. They weren't concerned when he began to sleep in the enclosure, as they knew for a fact that those dinosaurs meant no harm to him, and were his bestest friends. They would protect him like a guard dog with much bigger teeth. They were able to leave him home alone as well at his age, just because they knew he wasn't truly alone or defenseless. Back to the park, Issei was becoming a sand castle. No, not making a sand castle, being the sand castle. How? Well, Kaneko had forced him onto his back and held him down as she piled sand on top of him. Eventually Issei had given up and lay there as Kaneko built a large sand castle within the sandbox. Yes, they were 12 and playing with the sand. There are old people who do it for fun. Shut up. Anyways, as Issei laid in the warm sun, He had closed his eyes and let out a big smile with a loud happy sigh. Kaneko was quiet as usual, but she was closest to Issei despite the fact Rias saved her. Issei was really the one who got her out of her shell. Issei was just that awesome of a person. Kaneko finished up her sand castle and Issei opened his eyes, staring at the 4-foot beauty of a castle. Wow, it's massive. Thanks. Kaneko said very softly. I'm serious. It's awesome. Kaneko nodded and sat there, looking at her feet. Today is the anniversary, isn't it? Kaneko nodded. You don't have to worry. I will always be here to protect you. No one will harm you ever again. I promise. Forever and ever. Kaneko looked over at him and let out a smile. She got up to give him a hug but then remembered he was buried alive. They both let out a small laugh and Kaneko began to dig him out, though Akino had ended up ruining that by using her magic and dumping water all over Issei, flooding him out of the sandbox. Akino had gotten her sadistic streak ever since the Dali incident, and it had increased daily. Issei had begun to fear her, but liked her nonetheless. Kiba was still a grumpy-wumpy person, but he was coming out of it as well. Issei did not know too much about what happened, only that he went through something terrible. During his stay with Rias and her family, as they had many sleepovers at the mansion, Issei had received his evil pieces, directly and personally from Serzex and Ajuka Beelzebub. He had kept them with him, and hadn't used them even when he got home. He had no idea what to do. Back of the present. Issei was 14 now and was currently playing with the dinos. He had began to make up play dates with the dinosaurs, so he would spend more time with them since he knew he had been neglecting them the past few years. Of course, they loved him to death but they were lonely. Issei had not used his evil pieces to this day, so he was sitting there with all the pieces but the king, which he was now a king. Issei was playing tag with the raptor packs, though what was really going on was they were making him run away from them, which they would use their superior tactics in cornering the devil and tagging him with a play bite. The Spino was off resting upon the large rock that rested in the much larger pond. His tail would lazily swing in the water. The Rex was off doing Rex things, most likely overwatching Issei like a hawk. The Rex was most likely in the forest, overwatching the clearing. While the Spino was the strongest, he wasn't actively protecting Issei, though if anyone screwed with Issei, the Spino wouldn't be happy. The Spino was by far the laziest of the dinosaurs. The Rex was very protective of Issei, but this was actually a known habit that Issei was breaking the Rex of. The raptors were the most playful, due to their size being in more line with Issei's. They were also well-known pranksters as well, always messing with Issei. One time and the only time Issei was ever in a sleeping bag, they had slowly nudged him together, doing it slowly, and dunked him into the lake. Due to the fact they didn't roll him and he didn't really feel the movement, he was asleep the whole time. Never again did he use a sleeping bag in the enclosure, and at random times they would scare him with a loud roar and he would never know it was coming. While they were gifted pranksters, he did get along with them very well. He would always train his body with them, which was another reason why he was running away. He was also training in his strength with the two larger dinos, as the two big ones would bring him large rocks which he would lift up to build his upper body strength, or his legs. So, his relationships with the dinos was great. As he was running away, a loud bang was heard and the enclosure shook. The Spino woke up from his lazy nap and looked over towards the entrance to the enclosure, and looked towards the glass of the viewing box/control box. Using the infrared vision, the Spino watched as 4 figures trapped his parents in the cage only for the mother to disappear completely from the infrared. It was then the intercom turned on while the large door began to open. "Run, Issei!" His father yelled out, only to scream as he disappeared in a flash of light as a light spear entered his chest. Issei had seen the death of his father, as his eyes were wide. Tears began to flow out as he stood stock still, in shock at what was happening. After a few seconds he quickly ran towards the doors, but the Rex quickly nabbed Issei in his and began to carry him away. "No! Let me go! I have to save them!" The Rex did nothing but carry him towards the back of the enclosure, towards the cave. The Spino entered the pond and began to travel along the deep river, his eyes the only visible thing above water like a croc. The raptors had spread out in the forest, keeping their eyes on the door. 6 fallen angels entered the enclosure. The leader in the middle was the only one flying in the air. He pointed out in every direction. "Find the runt! Now! He cannot be left alive. The research done here must not be completed. Move!" The fallen angels all spread out as the leader flew off over the river and above the pond before moving into the back of the forest, towards the cave area, which was sealed off now with a large door that looked like a rock. One of the fallen angels, the only female, was flying around in the forest, zipping low along the ground as she held her spear out for light through high jungle. She quickly stopped and turned her head as she heard a rustling in the bushes. She moved over to the bush and shoved her spear into it, and it connected with something soft which yelped out. She grinned and opened the bush, only to find a goat. She blinked and furrowed her brows, only to turn around only to let out a scream as she was pounced upon by a flash of brown. The female screamed in pain and death, loud enough for the whole enclosure to hear. After a few seconds of screaming, her voice was cut off by a large claw in her heart. There was then a loud calling by one of the raptors, letting the other dinos know one was down. All right. The boy is hostile and armed. Watch yourself, the leader yelled out. 3 fallen angels had grouped up together finally, searching through the forest like it was a grid search. They stood only 10 yards apart, and searched every inch of the forest as they moved about. There was a blur of brown, and the right fallen angel was taken out instantly, not even a chance to scream though he was choking on his own blood. The fallen angel in the middle let out a yell as he noticed the fallen angel on his right was gone, only to turn around as the left one was gone as well. The fallen angel's eyes went wide as he rushed away, flying towards the center of the enclosure, only to come upon a clearing. He gulped. Sir, I think the boy isn't the one doing this. There is something out here. Something big. The fallen angel yelled out. What? All right, we are coming, the leader said, and the whooshes was heard. When the leader arrived, the fallen angel was gone. The only thing different was 6 bubbles on the pond were visible and popping when they arrived. When the leader looked into the pond, his eyes went wide as the fallen angel's body floated to the top, ripping into 2 pieces. I'm getting out of here. Burn this place to the ground, the leader roared, flying out quickly towards the entrance. The other fallen angel blinked and quickly chased, but a quick blur from the right, and he was screaming as he was having his stomach devoured. The leader never looked back and exited the entire facility. He turned around and opened up a magic circle. 5 seconds later, the entire facility began to burn, with the flames spreading to the enclosure last. The leader quickly flew away, heading back to the fallen angel's realm of the underworld. Issei was taken far away through the cave system, to a portal at the end. When the Rex exited, Issei was greeted with a large clearing that was so similar to the enclosure, it was like the enclosure was a duplicate. Which it was. The Rex placed Issei on the clearing before the raptors appeared very suddenly, obviously having sprinted through. They quickly surrounded Issei before spreading out in all directions around the forest, performing a quick defensive search of the area. About a minute later, the Spino appeared and his tail smashed the portal and destroyed it just as the flames began to come out. The Spino quickly formed a circle with his body and the Rex pushed Issei into the middle of it, before the raptors came and entered the circle, snuggling up with Issei. Issei's eyes were wide and red with tears, and he was just staring emotionlessly into the night. About 5 hours later, in the mansion of the underworld, Rias, Akino, Kiba and Kaneko were watching the evening news like they do every night. However, each and every one of them were staring wide-eyed and devastated as the coverage of the burning of Issei's house and the discovering of the deaths of his parents, due to some ashes left behind. It was also assumed that Issei died in the fire, due to some charred remains in what was the enclosure of the facility. The remains were not identifiable due to the flames, yet his parents were. Very strange. No. Everyone said at once as tears began to flow. The next day followed since the tragic death of his parents. Issei was carried away by the mother Rex, which was oddly one of 2 females of the group. The other female was one of the raptors in the pack, but not the leader. The Spino and the raptors stayed back and killed off most of the fallen angels, all but one who escaped and burned the place to the ground. They were giving Issei enough time to get out safely. Despite the fact they are extinct animals, these animals were given much smarter brains than before. Larger ones too for their cranial size at the cost of reducing how the bones of the skull was, but they were reinforced by the genes of other animals so they were just as strong if not stronger than the original skulls. Due to this increased brain power, they all were able to communicate with each other with simple growls and such, making complex plans and such. As such, one of the plans was a contingency plan if Issei was ever put into mortal danger, and if his parents were incapacitated. So they had enacted the plan. With the raptor's speed and the fact Spino could operate in water and other locations, not to mention being stronger than the Rex at fighting, even though the Rex still had a much stronger bite force, the Rex was to get Issei to safety at all times, while the Spino and raptors kept the enemies at bay using their superior hunting skills. The raptors would lay traps, trick their opponents or otherwise, while the Spino would just rip things apart. Back in the enclosure, the raptors and Spino worked together as the raptors pushed one of the fallen angels towards the lake, only to be taken under by a massive croc-like creature, ergo the Spino. They had other plans, of course, which included following up with the contingency plan. Keeping Issei alive. This was especially important as he was still a child and important as he was traumatized. The dinos missed the older devils, but they were not close to them at all. Only to Issei, but that was the plan of the parents after all. So, with Issei not in a condition to fend for himself, the dinos would do so for him. The raptors did search the surrounding woods for any signs of trouble or dangers, while the Spino and Rex were the defensive ones. Afterwards, the Rex and raptors would go out hunting for meat for Issei, since the Spino was closer to Issei than the Rex. Of course the raptors played with Issei more, so he was closer to them, but the Spino was not far behind. The Rex was not a stranger to Issei, and Issei made every attempt to play with her, but playing with the larger creatures was not easy since one misstep would end his life, or at least maim him. So the Spino would stay on guard duty. The dinos knew that Issei was going through hard times, so they weren't surprised to see that his routine was sleep, eat, stare blankly into the distance, eat, stare some more, eat and then sleep. He would spend a lot of time sleeping in the warmth of the large Spinosaurus, but this was okay to them. They would eventually help him along, but he needed time to himself. A week had passed since the death of his parents, and Issei was no longer staring blankly. He was now always deep in thought, and he was left alone by the large reptiles. The reptiles were very happy to see he was no longer in his deep funk, but they were curious about what he was thinking about. Would he leave them to go on his own? Commit suicide? Who knows, but all the bad ideas did run through their head as they worried for their young friend. 2 weeks had passed and Issei was finally out and walking. It was then he turned around and looked at the reptiles who gathered before him. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for protecting me, keeping me alive and safe, Issei said, a small tear exiting his right eye. The alpha raptor was next to him, gently nuzzling his cheek as he chirped to the boy. Issei smiled and patted the other side of the raptor's head as he hugged him tightly to him. I'm alright, but I know my parents would not want me to be like this. My father told me to always be strong, so I want to get strong in order to protect anyone I care about, including you. I don't always want to have to rely on you, despite the fact I love you guys. I would never think about abandoning you, but I cannot allow myself to be weak like I am now. My parents told me that I had a large abundance of magical power, and when I was a child I scared them. They secretly told me that I rivaled Xerxes in terms of magical power. I think it's time that I learned how to harness my power instead of playing games with my friends. A few chirps from the other raptors and a few growls from the larger ones told Issei their thoughts. No, I am not saying that things cannot be like they were, but I cannot just sit here and only play. I must work and train to become stronger. I will never ever not want to play with you guys, and I want to be with you guys forever. Which is why, Issei said slowly, reaching into his pocket and pulling out 8 pawn pieces, a queen and a rook. I want to make you into my peerage, at least the beginning of it. Would you guys have me as your king? The dinos all chirped or growled in response, agreeing to being Issei's servants. They were his friends and would stand by his side. With a tear running down his cheek and a smile, he walked around and began giving out the pieces. He was so happy and cried a bit as he knew he was in good hands. Each of the raptors accepted a pawn piece each. He was going to use 2, but luckily they only took 1. He gave the Spino his queen and the Rex his rook. He would always want the Spino by his side, as he was the greatest protector of them all. The Rex was also a great choice for rook, as the increase to defense helped him since all he had was his teeth. But then the extra strength on his jaws? Absolutely monstrous. With loud roars, the Rex and Spino roared into the night, scaring off the birds and other creatures in a 3-mile radius. The raptors began to call out to each other, telling the others that they accepted Issei as their pack leader, though the alpha was still a pack leader as well. Unknown to Issei and his crew, those roars were heard all the way back at the mansion. Though Rias and Aquino thought they were just animals nearby, they were still bedridden from depression. 6 months later, Issei was sitting on a rock, visualizing on using his magic. He was still on the basics, as he was still quite the puny one. He had amazing potential, but it was not able to be controlled. After an incident in the forest, which left a good half-mile going up the mountain desolate, he knew he needed to control his magic. So he started to work on the basics that he read about in a book. Issei did not know what exactly his power was until the incident, but after it happened he knew that he got lucky. He could have wiped out miles all around him. 2 years have passed and Issei was 16 now. He was now able to use his magic a lot better. He was currently blowing rocks up with well-timed magic attacks, all of his own style, all in rapid succession. His magic is a variation of his parents, a type of explosion but on a different level. While he wasn't using his full potential, he still had some more growth to go before he could control the massive magical energy in his body. A year ago, Issei was done with the visualization basics and began to focus more on the small efforts of using his magic to make tiny explosions. He was blowing apart twigs, not trees, twigs, turning them into nothingness. Complete destruction. He could do so much more, but this was his training. 6 months ago, he gained more control over his magic, blowing apart rocks and trees into pieces or complete disintegration, depending on the size of the target. This was done one at a time, very slowly and carefully. Issei finally turned 17. A year has passed and he had complete control over his magic, turning him into an ultimate class devil, if magic was the only thing for it. He had a very poor body for a devil. He had quite the baby fat on him still and he didn't really have any muscles, but he wasn't bad to look at either. He was actually quite handsome and with his shirt on, he looked like a normal average teenager. Looking behind him, in a 3-mile radius of the clearing they trained in, the forest was completely flattened. A mile around, there was no trees or rocks. The ground was completely incinerated like the rocks and trees. The other 2 miles was completely flattened into nothing but dust or wood chips. The farther out from the middle, the less damage was caused as even 5 miles out, trees were bent or crooked, some were missing leaves, some were uprooted. But it wasn't as bad 3 miles from the circle. Anyways, as he was 17 now, he sighed and rubbed his hair. He had learned how to wield his powers and he knew he was finally ready to move back into society. He was going to try and continue his parents' life work, despite having to start from scratch. He promised himself he would complete his task for the world. Issei turned to his friends and smiled. We are going to move to a town in Japan called Ka. My parents have a research facility there that should still be there. It would be needing some touch-ups, but that's why we got magic, right? There is a large enclosure there as I think that is where you guys were born before you were moved here. I think I will expand the enclosure as well and possibly just remodel the place. But let's try and make it homey, Issei said, forming a magic circle under himself before taking only himself into town. He transported himself next to the facility, only to smile. It was still standing but it was covered in vines and foliage. It was on the outskirts of town in the mountains and forest, so it was a secret, and would easily allow him to expand. He entered the facility through the unlocked door, chuckling. His parents had complete faith in the world so they kept doors and windows unlocked as it was just easier on them to enter or exit. He frowned as he knew that was their downfall too. He clenched his fists, as anger flowed through his veins, but he ignored it and sighed, moving through the house towards the laboratory. He entered the large lab and turned on a light switch. Slowly but surely, the large fluorescent lamps in the lab turned on and lit the room up in a glow like it was a hospital. There was egg incubators, a ton of DNA crap and other tools. He had finally traveled to the beginning of his friends. After gently touching up on his beginning, he knew he would have time in the future to reminiscence. For now, he had work to do. He quickly summoned his friends into the enclosure and met up with them, but he told them that he was going to begin life again so he would end up going back to school, going to high school in this town. He was going to hack into the school mainframe and put himself as a transfer student tonight, but he wouldn't be able to attend school for a few more days since it is a Friday. It may be morning, but it wouldn't take effect for a few days anyway. So for the rest of the day, he would use the computer and review his parents' work before working around the house and getting it cleaned up, which would what he would be doing all weekend besides shopping for clothes. He was going to go to school and get college help before continuing their work. Luckily, all their work was not destroyed as it was backed up to the internet and sent here to this facility. So, Issei was 17 now, going to school in a few days as a second year, all the while planning for his future. He may not know it, but his friends also knew he had plans for revenge as well, plans to find the one who sent those fallen angels after his parents, and make them pay. But the dinos were also thirsty for their blood. On Saturday, Issei spent the day preparing for school. He had traveled to the local mall where he got all of his school supplies, which was a backpack, several notebooks, an army of pens and pencils, and a few other items. He also had to pick up the school uniform at the school itself where he met with a member of the student council, Asaji Genshiro, who was the school treasurer. After a small talk and a thank you, Issei went back home through a magic circle where he sat on a computer all day and night, learning more and more about what his family did for a living, all their secrets and such. He also planned for school more by researching colleges and such for his future. It was finally Saturday night at about 2 in the morning when Issei hit the bed and passed out. He was exhausted by his research and didn't see what the time was until it was too late. Upon falling asleep, Issei's usual nightmare never appeared. What appeared was fire, hot fire. Issei was sweaty upon waking up surrounded by the flames, and he was panicking as he saw no way out. It was then a deep voice was heard. I have deemed it time we meet, boy. You have finally grown up and moved on from your depression, so I decided to finally make my appearance. While I usually talk to those who are my partners early on, I decided to do a different approach this time and wait until the time was right to appear before you. Who are you? What do you want with me? Issei cried, looking for the source of the voice. It was then a large red western dragon appeared from beyond the flames and towered over the area. 2 large paws appeared in the flames, and he looked down at the boy. I am the Welsh dragon Draig. I am also known as the Red Dragon Emperor. It is to meet you, Issei Hyoudou. The boosted gear in my dream? Well, I suppose this is quite a good let-up from the nightmares, I suppose. Issei laughed out before looking up at the dragon. So, how can I help you? This is not a dream, young one. I am not some sort of illusion. I am your partner and you are mine. Sorry, but I'm not human, so that's not possible. You are a half-human and half-devil. So yes, it is possible. Not possible. I'm a full-blooded devil. Wait, why am I even arguing with a dream? Issei said, face-palming. Draig sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose with a paw. I suppose this is to be expected. They never told you well. You will find out soon enough that I am real, I'm sure. Issei laughed as the fire and dragon disappeared into the black before Issei began to have his nightmare again, reliving the death of his parents, though it kept rewinding to the beginning, emphasizing on the fact he never did a thing and let them die. About 6 hours later of the bad dreams, Issei woke up in a sweat but grabbed the towel next to his bed and wiped his brow. He rubbed his temple before sighing, sitting up at the edge of his bed as he looked at his hands, breathing a bit harder than a normal person would. These dreams, are you trying to repent for not doing anything for your parents? What could you have done, kid? You had no fighting experience. Plus, they were so quick that by the time you ran to get to your parents, they would be dead. And sure, your peerage could have killed them like they did back then. But what is going to stop them from killing you first, as it was their mission? You were a little child. Don't be so hard on yourself, plus you can still avenge them, said a voice in Issei's head. Issei's eyes went wide and he quickly looked around the room, seeing if anyone else was in his house. No, child. As I said in your dream, I am no dream. I am real and we are partners. How is this possible? I'm a full-blooded devil. Your parents lied to you, obviously to protect you. My guess is because you were looked down upon by a lot of devil families for being mixed blood. They wanted to tell you it was because you were from an extra demon family. No, your family is actually very popular in the devil world for your family's research projects. But the reason that you were picked on was because you are half human. I don't know who was the human, but one of your parents was a human, or at least was a human when conceiving you. Issei looked at the wall and shook his head. I can't believe it, he said out loud. My parents lied to me, to protect you. I know, and it would have made me feel better. Now I'm not so happy with the devil world, seeing how they treat people. Issei said, shaking his head in disappointment. So I'm half human, huh? As I said before, you are a half human, half devil. A mixed breed, Draig said before laughing heartily. What's so funny? Your existence is a joke. As a devil, your power is already on par with a god. Well, if you went all out, your normal power, you are on par with ultimate class devils. Then you are a human, and you are possessed by one of the Longinus, the boosted gear. You are by far the strongest Red Dragon Emperor the world has ever seen, and you will be the best there ever will be. A joke, huh? I don't mean it badly, but the fact that you are so unbelievably powerful, this world is yours for the taking. I have no interest in world domination. You also have the power to change the world. That is what I would like to do, change the world. Make it better, though I have no right to change it to my image. I am not a tyrant, but I can nudge it along. Indeed. You do understand what your future will hold, right? Battling with the White Dragon Emperor? Sounds fun, actually, Issei said with a grin. You enjoy fighting? I enjoy fighting very much so. Especially between rivals. I see. Well, I can't say that I don't enjoy fighting. I am a dragon after all. I know. Perhaps it was you and the sacred gear who got me to be a fighter, but it might also be because I grew up with creatures known for bloodshed. I'd say both would be at fault. You were raised by ancient reptiles that were extinct millions of years ago. I will say that I am very impressed with what your parents did. They treated you very well. Thanks, I loved my parents. They were great to me. They never pushed me to become the head of the household either. They wanted me to have fun. I don't know what kind of future they wanted me to have, though. They would have wanted you to shape your own future, not be preset into joining the family as a researcher. They enjoyed their work, but I doubt you would. You need to find a future for yourself. You know, for a dragon you are quite wise. Funny, you little brat. Dragons are known to be wise as they are violent. Is that so? I thought they were quite dumb actually, considering they act all primitive. Drake chuckled at the boy. You are lucky I know you are messing with me. What could you have done if I wasn't? You're stuck with me. I could never speak to you again. And that's a bad thing? Issei said with a grin. Funny, I try. Issei said as he finished getting dressed. He looked himself in the mirror and sighed, rubbing his head. What is my next step? Continue with what you planned. Learning that you are the Red Dragon Emperor should change nothing. Do what you want to do. I think it might be best if I hide the aura of my dragon. Unless you actually use the sacred gear, no one would actually know you are the Red Dragon Emperor. Well, that helps. So a sacred gear, with my knowledge of them, I know that subspecies have came forth, and changes that never happened before has occurred. I wonder if I can make different things happen with my sacred gear and evolve. I have had other users who have evolved as you put it. They used their own powers and enhanced it with a dragon. I had one user who was a master summoner, and would transfer the power of my Red Dragon Emperor to his creations and make uber monsters. He was actually one of the strongest I've had. However, he was killed in his sleep by an ex-lover. Huh. Well, I think it would be fun to work on my sacred gear and become even more powerful. I look forward to it. Alright. Well, I think I will look into my family's history for a while, find out which one of my parents was human. Maybe they put it on the computer. It's possible. Good luck, kid. I will be here if you need me. Not a talker? My users have never really wanted to talk to me. That's boring. I'd rather have someone to talk to as well. We could learn from each other. Drake chuckled. You are definitely the brightest of any of my users. Thank you. So, what do you want to do today? Perhaps I can help. How about you teach me more about sacred gears and such, and how to use what I have? I would be glad to. For 2 hours, Issei and Drake talked about sacred gears and what you could do with them. Issei didn't get any knowledge about them, so he had a limited knowledge. He did know that they reacted to feelings and they could change and gain abilities, though it was rare they did so. Only those strong enough or bright enough were able to gain new abilities or change their sacred gear altogether. For 10 hours after that, Issei summoned his sacred gear in the basement. He had enhanced the entire area with magic spells which allowed him to train at will without worry of damaging anything. So he trained for 10 hours, learning how to use his sacred gear properly, though he knew he could improve and get better. But that would come with time. Now it was sleepy time. It was Monday morning and Issei was already at school at 7:30, though school didn't start for another half hour. He arrived early and got in his classes, so he was sitting in a seat. He had claimed this seat as his, and it will always be his. Class started and went smoothly. Issei was introduced by the teacher. Issei introduced himself further, and a lot of the females in the class began to fawn over him for his looks and personality. Lunch arrived and it was well received by Issei. If there was one thing all men like, it's food. Everyone needs foods to eat, but no, men love to eat. Anyways, Issei ate his lunch surrounded by the females of his class, and he talked to them with smiles. He was a very sweet boy obviously, so the girls just loved him. He had heard he was the second school prince, which was kind of a weird thing for him to be called that. Who was the king of the school? The queen? Plus, what did it mean? He thought about that for a minute or two, but Issei paid no mind to it, and left his table to put his tray back. He had said goodbye to the group of females at his table as he was going to return to class, despite the groans from the females. They wanted to spend more time with him. It was now time for people to return to class as they had a 10-minute break between classes, but also one right after the second lunch period. As Issei was making his way through the halls, he spotted something. A white-haired female. Issei's eyes went wide and he quickly made his way through the crowd and tapped on the shoulder of a nearby female. Who is that white-haired girl? That would be Kaneko Tuju. She is very reserved though and doesn't talk much to others. The men in the school say she's the school mascot. Thank you very much, Issei said with a big smile. His smile was from ear to ear. He had found one of the girls from his past. He quickly made his way through the hall, catching up to the female. He quickly wrapped his arms around Kaneko and began to open his when he found an elbow in his gut, a foot in his shin and backhand to the nose, sending him flying back into a locker. Issei was now bleeding from his nose and his shin hurt like hell. Issei was now wheezing as the air had left his lungs from the elbow. His vision swirled for a moment. He didn't have the aura on from his powers, so he felt the full power of Kaneko, who used a lot of strength. Obviously not enough to kill a human, but it would still hurt a lot. Everyone stood stunned as the second school prince had hugged the mascot from behind and was sent flying. No one had any idea how to react to this situation, so they just watched onward. This all happened in the middle of a hallway. Kaneko turned around and her eyes widened visibly as she saw the person on the ground. She then heard the whispers about how the mascot had violently rejected affection from the school prince. She quickly moved towards Issei and tears began to build up in her eyes. She had hurt him. Issei Hyoudou. The boy who returned. Issei smiled a bit at seeing Kaneko rush to his side, but his smile disappeared when he saw her beginning to tear up. Despite the lack of air in his lungs, Issei sat up and wiped away her eyes before giving her a gentle smile. He shook his head at her, telling her no tears. Kaneko nodded and quickly hugged Issei around his neck, in which he responded with another hug. This brought upon ahs and ohs from the crowd, but they ignored it. Kaneko released her grasp of Issei before pulling him up to his feet quickly and dragging him off. She was aiming to take him somewhere quiet and private, but the warning bell rang and Kaneko stopped. She turned around and looked up at Issei, who had grown quite a lot since she last saw him. "Meet me at the bulletin board at the front of the school after school," Kaneko demanded, walking away albeit reluctantly. Issei rubbed his head a bit, not really sure what just happened. He didn't exactly expect this kind of warm welcome from a friend from long ago, but he shrugged. He decided to ignore it as it was just a bad timing kind of thing. He smiled and went back to class. At the end of the day, Issei was leaning against the bulletin board of the school when Kaneko appeared at his side without him noticing. With a visible jump in surprise, Issei quickly recovered. Kaneko grabbed his hand and dragged him off again, taking him towards the old school building which Issei thought was like a storage building. He was released at the front doors and she looked up at him. "Come with me in a few minutes." "I can't come now?" "No," Kaneko said bluntly. "Oh, all right," Issei said, confused a bit, scratching his head. 5 minutes sharp," Kaneko said, walking back into the building. Issei looked extremely confused and tried to understand the girl. He never really understood Kaneko sometimes, though it was because she was different than the others. He liked her nonetheless, but it was still difficult sometimes to understand the white-haired devil. Issei sighed and opened the front door at 5 minutes, already finding out he was going to be late as he had to find the room Kaneko was in. After another 3 minutes of searching the large building, Issei came upon a set of large double doors. As he was about to open the door, he heard voices. "Come now, my dear. Riser has come all this way just to greet his fiancée. There is no need to be so feisty. I will say it once again, Riser, I have no interest in marrying you," Ria said. Issei's eyes went wide as he recognized her voice. It was Rias! His long-lost friend Rias. He was going to get back together with the gang. Issei was giddy and was very happy inside. He was going to reunite with his old friends. He quickly pinched himself harshly, in which he said out very quietly, and rubbed his arm. Not a dream. He was getting very excited now as he thought about when he entered the room. He would get the bestest welcome back ever. Issei was looking like a child with $20 at a candy shop. Riser did not come all this way just to hear no. "You don't get a choice, Rias. Your father, brother and your entire clan has set this marriage up for the good of the devils. You can be difficult all you want, but you will be coming onto that altar with me. Got it?" Riser said, sounding very arrogant as usual. Issei blinked and looked at the door, not very happy with what he had heard. Rias, being forced into a marriage she doesn't want? What kind of world does that sort of thing? He clenched his fists angrily at the thought of Rias with a guy she hated, especially one that would not be very nice to her. Issei heard a slight struggle. Riser had obviously grabbed onto Rias, most likely her arm, and she was struggling to pull away. "I think it's time you face the facts. You are marrying me and there is nothing you can do to stop it," Riser said. "Actually," Issei said loudly, opening the door and stepping through it, glaring at the man holding on to his friend roughly. "There will be no marriage." "Issei?" Rias and Aquino exclaimed, both of them staring at their long-lost friend with wide eyes. Rias yanked herself from Riser's grasp and rushed with Aquino over to Issei. Issei quickly dodged the affectionate hugs, not deeming it an appropriate time. He walked over towards Riser, crossing his arms. "Who the are you?" Riser asked. "How dare you get in my way? How dare I?" Issei laughed a bit. "No, how dare you? I will not allow some arrogant prick to marry one of my friends. If she is going to marry anyone, it's going to be someone like me, who will treat her nicely and with respect. You would do neither. You are only interested in the political power you would receive from such a union." Issei spat. "You think you are owed her, don't you? How pathetic. If you ever lay your hands on Rias again, I will personally put you in your place." Got that? Who the do you think you are talking to Riser like that? I will burn you into dust, you insolent little shit, Riser said as fire began to cover his body. A sudden flash of white light and Graphia appeared. There will be no fighting in the human world. Do I make myself clear? Riser quickly felt fear enter his veins and quickly doused his flame. Of course. Issei looked over at Graphia and smirked. Graphia turned to Issei and bowed. It is good to see you are not dead after all, but I'm not here to greet you. I am here with a proposal from my master. If Rias refuses to go along with what was decided, then Riser must be defeated in a raiding game. I accept the terms, Issei said quickly, staring at Riser. Riser laughed. It's supposed to be a raiding game between Rias and I. You are not involved, little boy. Sounds like someone is a bit afraid of losing and you call yourself a man? What was that? I challenged you to a raiding game. You think you are manly by trying to fight against someone who obviously has never done one? You are pathetic, Riser Phoenix. What, how dare you? You keep on saying that, but it never fails to amuse me. So, are you going to accept the challenge or not? Riser accepts, but if you lose, Rias will belong to me and you must stay out of it. Fine, Issei said, looking at Riser. I accept. Graphia nodded. The raiding game will be next Saturday, as this week is a school week. Fine, both of the men said. Graphia disappeared into a magic circle. Riser began to disappear into his own but smirked. You will die on that battlefield, boy. All deaths in raiding games are accidents. Ahahaha. Riser laughed out loud before disappearing. Issei sighed and slicked back his hair before turning towards the females. He gave them a small grin. Rias was looking at Issei with disbelief and many other emotions running over her face. Akino was as well, while Kaneko was sitting on her couch, looking at him with a few other emotions. Kiba was sitting next to Kaneko, looking at Issei with happiness on his face. The girls began to surround Issei now, well, more like Akino and Rias. They looked at him with worry, concern, happiness, and shock. They began to hammer him with questions. Where have you been? Are you okay? What happened? Are you okay? Did you miss us? How did you find us? Why did you come back just now? Are you okay? I miss you. Where have you been? Issei's eyes went wide as his fists began to clench as he backed up into a wall, as he was beginning to get overwhelmed with the constant questions from the two girls and Kiba, who decided to jump in as well. He began to look like a deer caught in the headlights, and his mind was swirling. Are you okay? I miss you. Where have you been? What happened? Are you okay? How did you find us? Are you okay? Where have you been? Are you okay? Say something, Issei. Where have you been? Issei, talk to me. I miss you. Why did you come back just now? Where have you been? Are you okay? I miss you. After being hammered for a good 3 minutes with questions from the overeager girls, Issei quickly teleported himself out of the room, teleporting himself back to his house, appearing in the laboratory. Just as he appeared, he quickly sat himself down in the large rolling recliner, that was completely cushioned leather. Once he sat down, the green gem from his boosted gear appeared on his right arm. That was completely cowardly, you know that, right? I know, sigh. Kid, you just saw your friends after so long and you ran away. I know. So, what's the plan for dealing with this? I don't know. Focus on the raiding game that I got myself put into? Speaking of that, what were you thinking? I didn't want her to marry someone like him. You would rather her marry you, eh? I never said that. Drake chuckled. Come now, you would rather her marry someone like you, right? Of course. I am not like that asshole. She doesn't even like him. She at least likes me. Well, what makes you think she likes you like that? You know what I meant, Drake. Damn it, you are an asshole too. Good, now we are finally getting to know each other. I'm an asshole and you're a coward. I know I am, but I didn't know what else to do. They just kept hammering me with questions and I panicked. Okay. I know I'm despicable. Well, don't worry about it now, kid. You can make it up to them by beating the Phoenix in a raiding game, which again, do you have any idea what the hell you are going to do? Use my peerage? And if they fail? A Phoenix can keep regenerating, which is where your Dino friends got their regeneration from. I didn't get that far. Use my magic? Didn't you want to keep that hidden from the public for a while? Yes, and the fact I am the Red Dragon Emperor too. Then what is the plan? Use my magic. Still just refrain from using that. Well, I suppose it could work. Just keep hammering at him, and he will fall eventually. Just avoid getting burned to a crisp. You do understand you will be held back because you don't have a decent body, right? Even my powers would be mostly useless to you until you got some strength. I know. That's why I'm going to be skipping school this week and work on something. You are not going to get a body sufficient enough in time for this rating game. Au contraire, my dear friend. Drake narrowed his eyes in the boosted gear, and Issei knew he was doing it too. I wonder what you have cooked up, boy, I eagerly await. Back in the ORC clubroom, Rias and Aquino were taken aback when Issei suddenly disappeared. Did he just walk out on me? Rias asked incredulously. He just walked out on me, he left me again. Aquino said, her eyes becoming slightly hollow. Only because you guys are idiots, Kaneko said from the couch, sipping some tea. What? Rias turned and looked at her rook. You guys pressured the guy into a corner, and you expected him to what? Answer all those questions while he couldn't even speak? He caved and had to leave because it was too much for him. Not a lot of people could handle that kind of pressure. He just got back in town, and he is already scared of you girls once again. Scared of us? Why would he ever be scared of us? Aquino asked. Do I really need to bring up the makeup incident that happened multiple times back in the underworld? The two girls blushed and Kiba chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. I guess we did kind of screw up the reunion. Kiba said. I did nothing of the sort, don't lump me in the same group as you three. So, I guess we see him tomorrow. Rias said. If he shows up. Kiba replied. I won't be surprised if he skips school this week. He already has to do battle with Riser, and he doesn't need the pressure from you guys on top of that. Speaking of the bird, does he stand a chance? Kaneko asked. I don't know. Rias said, her face getting a bit worried, even frightened. Aquino smiled softly. I'm sure Issei can win. We have to believe in our childhood Vic, friend. Aquino said, smirking at her purposeful slip-up. Kaneko rolled her eyes. Oh, what wonders await his return, she said much more dryly than usual. Back in the lab, Issei was on the large supercomputer and was looking up the genes/DNA within the laboratory stores. He was pulling data from the animals and plant life, putting what he wanted into a separate folder. After an hour of separating data, he was in the folder now, searching through the data banks. You couldn't be doing what I think you are doing. Issei grinned and made a new folder, moving the must-have data into the folder. This included the data on the dung beetle, the hummingbird, the golden eagle, the great gray owl, the African elephant, the norovirus stand though now safe, cyanide which was made safe by his parents, and a bunch of different smaller chemicals. Issei smiled and began to bring up the program that would bring to fruition his plans. The dinosaurs, though it was only the raptors, were currently outside the house in the forest, capturing a bunch of rabbits from the forest, and bringing them back to the house and dropping them into a large cage before picking up some more for Issei. The two larger creatures were simply resting either on a rock or somewhere in the forest. As the program was working, Issei went to bed. He had food in the cage for the rabbits, a bunch of lettuce and carrots. There was also plenty of room for moving around for the 40 rabbits that were needed for the project. As Issei laid in bed, he looked up at the dark ceiling and thought about what the future would hold for him now that he returned to the land of the devils and returned to his friends, albeit he was hiding from them now. What future awaited him? Would he be happy? Would he get a girlfriend? A wife? Children? Would he become super important in the world? Who knows, but he hoped he would make it somewhere. So, you are really going to go through with this crazy plan? There is nothing crazy about it. I'm a scientist. We always do these things. You are a kid who found your parents' chemistry set. Shut up. Hey, I look forward to the results of this, my friend. I am excited to see what happens. Either way, I back you up even though I think you are crazy. Thanks, Drake. Don't worry though, I do plan on eventually bringing you into the spotlight, but I want to wait for the right moment, a big show. Hey, no worries. It would be nice if it was to show off to the white one you suddenly appearing as a red dragon emperor, and no one had any idea. That would be great. That actually sounds like a good plan to me if it came around. Alright, good night, kid. Tomorrow, we begin to try out this crazy plan. The next morning came and Issei quickly took a shower, got dressed and ate a quick breakfast before rushing into the lab, checking the computer. Issei smiled at the results, and told the computer to begin his plan. With loud whirs throughout the laboratory, Issei brought in 10 rabbits, placing them in smaller cages though big enough to move around in comfortably. Issei placed a needle into his arm and began to draw blood from himself, filling up a large plastic bag with 8 cups of blood. When the bag was filled, Issei stood up only to fall against the table as his body went woozy. He quickly pulled himself into a chair before he passed out from giving up too much blood. 5 hours later, he awoke and smiled. The bag of blood was placed within many beakers and the computer was already injecting the beakers of blood with different liquids, and he eagerly awaited to see the results. He watched half of them completely fail as the blood either solidified, the blood exploded violently, or the blood turned black. Computer. With the rest of the blood, find which ones are still usable. Issei ordered. The computer whirred and began to place needles into the beakers, sucking blood up from the ones that looked good from the eye. Issei looked at the computer screen and nodded. Out of the 200 beakers, only 10 remained. Isolate the compounds that were placed in those beakers. It's time for some live tests. Issei said and watched the computer quickly whir around. He turned his head to the right as the 4 raptors appeared in the lab and began to walk around, curious to what Issei was doing. Ah, hey guys. I know it's been a while since I've played with you, but I ran into my old friends, you know, the girls? Well, I got myself into a bind. Let me begin the live tests, and I will talk to all of you, okay? The raptors chirped in response and returned through the door, and went back to the large open field. Issei sighed and turned, watching the rabbits get injected one by one with different chemicals. Issei nodded to himself, and went into the large field. Issei entered the large clearing and waited for everyone to surround him. It took about 5 minutes, but everyone was here. The Rex was sitting on a large rock formation, which was about 10 feet high. The Spino was laying on a rock that was in the large lake, while the raptors were laying in various locations in the area. I know it's been a while since I've played with you guys, but I just met up with Rias, Aquino, Kiba and Kaneko. You know those friends I told you about? The raptors chirped, and Issei glared at them. We don't speak of what they did to me. That wasn't funny. A chirp later, and Issei growled. Okay, back to my situation. Rias was in a bind. She was being forced to marry somebody she didn't want to. It was akin to rape. I stepped in, and now I have to fight for her to get out of this marriage, and I mean fight a battle. I need all of you at my side in order to win. I am confident that with just you guys, we can win, but I need to get stronger too, which is what I am doing in the lab. Please forgive me for now playing with you. The Spino let out a small growl, and Rex replied with his own, and Issei looked at the raptors, who chirped with their own response, which was quite rude. Issei smiled happily. Thank you. Yes, I know I should have known you guys would be by my side, but still. I had to ask. Okay, well, once we finish with this battle, I think we can start playing more. Maybe my friends could finally get to meet you. How does that sound? With chirps and growls in response, Issei's happiness went through the roof, and Issei quickly went back to the lab, ready to finish up for Saturday. Friday came along, and Issei was currently walking through the town of Kua, heading towards a small cafe that he heard had great drinks and sweets. For over 4 days he worked day in and day out, working on his experiments, trying to perfect the formula. While he was unable to do so, as he had limited amount of time, the formula was good enough for the time being. He figured out Thursday night that the DNA he has chosen for the first batch of formula was not good enough for perfection. He knew he could have improved, but he didn't think about it until too late. So Thursday night, he spent the night with the dinos. As usual, he didn't sleep in a bed but slept in the enclosure with his reptilian brethren. He always did this. He also played with them Thursday night, as he decided he was going nowhere with the formula perfection and needed to relax. Issei entered the cafe and took a seat at a corner booth, looking at the menu. He had decided to spend the day relaxing, going to the cafe for drinks and food, while either going to the arcade or going to watch a movie. He didn't have too much planned out for a relaxing day, but he was going to do his best before tomorrow's raiding game. As Issei was looking at the menu, he heard a voice that he didn't really want to hear today. Riser is surprised to see you still looking so frail. Riser would have thought you would have gotten at least some stronger for the raiding game. Issei looked down at his menu and looked at the trio before him. There was Riser, a blonde-haired girl that was his sister obviously, as they looked quite alike, and then there was a tall girl. She had short light brown hair and gray eyes. Her hair had red highlights, just 3 little stripes running downward. She had a white mask that covered the right side of her face. She wore a black jacket that had wide shoulders and a wide collar. The jacket was slightly open, and Issei could see that she had rather large breasts, and it was giving off quite a bit of cleavage. It was also cut at her midriff. She had matching jeans that had a section cut off on the thigh, revealing her creamy thighs and a nice butt. On both jacket and jeans she had 3 leather straps on both arms, on her calves, below the ankles, and 2 extra straps to keep the jeans on the right leg in place. She had black boots and fighting gloves. Funny, I could say the same thing to you, Issei said without missing a beat. Riser growled at Issei for his tongue. So, what do you want, Riser? Riser was merely just escorting his sister to this cafe she wanted to try out. Riser has no interest in meeting you. The feeling is mutual. Now you can take a seat at my table and order something, or go away, Issei said, directing this to the sister and the other girl. With a snobby attitude that was so easily detected, the sister, who was maybe a year or 2 younger than Issei, took a seat opposite of Issei while the other girls sat next to her. Riser raised a brow at the two and looked at Issei. Don't you dare hurt my little sister, boy, or Riser will have to kill you. I have no interest in hurting your sister, Riser. I just have an interest in beating you in the raiding game, Issei said calmly, not angrily. He was keeping calm and collected. Whatever, boy, Riser said, walking away. Issei returned to his menu for only a few seconds before someone decided to talk to him. So what kind of lunatic would willingly ask for a raiding game against the Phoenix? Surely you know of our accomplishments. Issei put down the menu and looked to his right as the waitress appeared. Need a few more minutes? She asked. Issei smiled sweetly. Yes, please. Thanks. The waitress walked away with a smile and Issei turned to the sister. The name is Issei Hyoudou. That's the lunatic that you so kindly pointed out, that is going to go against your brother. Hyoudou? The other girl asked. I thought the family line was dead. Issei put on a somber face, not happy that the subject was brought up. I'm the only survivor of my family. While I am supposed to be dead, I survived. My parents died before my eyes and I went into hiding. I am very sorry for your loss. Forgive me for prying. It's quite alright. Sob story aside, you do realize you are outmatched, right? The sister asked. She was very rude and was such a snob. Rudeness aside, you do realize looks aren't everything, right? TSCH, looks show quite a lot and you look weak. I see. Well, my main strength lies within my servants, and you are all going to find out firsthand what my servants can do. You will see that they are monsters. Monsters, what a joke. The girl scoffed. Please forgive my master's sister. She has hung around him quite a lot and gained his arrogance. The other girl said. Ravel was a short girl with long blonde hair tied up into two drill twin tails. She had pretty blue eyes. She was wearing a pretty pink dress with a red bow tie. It's all right. I wouldn't have allowed her to sit here if I couldn't take it, Issei said. Before we talk anymore, please pick something to order. It's quite rude to our waitress to keep her waiting, Issei said with a smile. 5 minutes later, their orders were taken and Issei looked at the two of them. So you know my name. Can I have the honors to know yours? He asked the both of them. He was brought up to be polite and courteous, especially to females. While he was known to be hot-headed at times, it was mainly during stressful times and battle. He was one to think on his feet a lot as well, but wasn't great at leading a group. He knew he would need to improve. I am Isabella. I am a rook, the girl said. Issei bowed his head to her politely. My name is Ravel Phoenix. You can my feet if you wish. It's nice to meet both of you, Issei said with a smile. So, why are you going against my brother anyway? Ravel asked curiously. She lost a lot of her attitude for the question. Well, I have no interest in hurting your brother, to be honest. The reason I threw myself into this raiding game was because he was trying to marry one of my friends, Rias Gremery. You may not know this, but Rias and I are childhood friends. We played together, bathed together, slept together, and we were pretty inseparable until that fated night. But Rias has no interest in marrying Riser. She doesn't like him like that, and that upsets me that Riser is trying to push something on my friend. She needs to get with the program and understand that this is for the good of the devil world. Good of the devil world? Issei asked. Have you been hiding under a rock? I know you are a commoner, but still. Issei sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a bit annoyed. Isabella decided to speak up. In the last war, we lost all our devil kings and all but 3 of the 72 pillars. Now I understand. We are running out of pure bloods, Issei said, sighing. Yes, the marriage is important for all devils, so this is why this marriage must go on. While I feel for the plight of the devils, as a man I cannot allow my friend to suffer through something like this, and this means I'm going to have to beat you guys in a raiding game and I will not lose. I will be bringing my all to this game, and you will see that what you see before you will only be a phantom tomorrow. You are confident in your abilities. I am impressed that a commoner could be such in face of our nobility and power. Little girl, I am not a commoner. While I may not be nobility like you or Rias, my family had quite an influence on the devil world. We were on the level of a Juka in terms of our research, and may have even surpassed him. Even Surzex recognized my parents' work, and they were great friends with the Devil King. So no, I am not a commoner, and I would appreciate if you would stop calling me that. You are beginning to really aggravate me, Issei said, warning her with stern eyes. Ravel was taken aback by his tone, and was slightly blushing. No one has ever talked to her that way, not even her parents. Someone just stood up to her, and she liked it. She shook her head from the thoughts that began to invade her mind and just humphed, looking away. Issei finished up his cake and his tea before standing up and paying the money on the table with a tip. He also paid for the other 2 at his table. Isabella saw this and smiled at Issei, who smiled back. Would you guys like to accompany me today? I plan on watching a movie or two, or attending an arcade before I prepare for tomorrow. We would be honored to come, Isabella said. Ravel just scoffed but followed Issei down the streets of Kua. Isabella was walking to the right of Issei while Ravel followed up behind. So, how strong are you, Isabella? Second strongest out of the pieces, except the king. I might be tied with the queen, but we haven't tested that yet. Well, since you told me that, my queen is my strongest, but the rook is about equal. The queen usually wins in fights, but the rook has won once or twice against him. Isabella nodded. Any good fist fighters? Issei grinned. That I would like to keep secret, but I do promise you will get a good fight. I look forward to it, Isabella said, grinning back at Issei. After 2 movies, it was dinner time, as Issei had only a box of popcorn and some cotton candy for lunch for the 2 long movies. Issei looked at the 2 girls. Would you girls like to accompany me to dinner, or is it time for you 2 to go? I'm afraid we have to leave, as Riser will be quite worried. We stayed out longer than we should have. Ah, well, I wish you luck in tomorrow's game. I mean it, Issei said, waving goodbye as he turned around and began to walk home. I wish you luck as well, Isabella said. Goodbye. Upon arriving home, Issei made his way into the lab and accessed the computer. Quickly typing in a command, the machines began to whir. In the middle of the lab, a large metal coffin-like machine appeared out of the floor and opened up. Issei typed in a few more commands and pressed the enter button to activate the protocols. He undressed into only his underwear and climbed into the coffin, laying his back against the cold metal. A few seconds later, the machine whirred and large arms appeared out of the ground. 2 arms had 2 large pads that contained 10 large needles each, while 8 arms appeared with a thin strip of pads but had 10 needles each as well. There was another arm that appeared with another large pad with 10 needles. The arms began to move around and align themselves with Issei's body, and he closed his eyes. 10 seconds later, the arms moved into position and the needles were forcefully sent into his body, and Issei groaned in pain as the large needles went into upper arms, lower arms, outer thighs and lower legs. The 3 large pads went into both of his pectoral muscles while 1 went into his abdomen. He heard the machine whir and liquid pumping as he felt the foreign liquid enter his body. With all the liquid into his body, the machine quickly removed the arms and the coffin began to close on Issei, sealing him in an airtight box. With the coffin sealed, 4 large lamps in the room turned on and was all pointed at the coffin, which began to heat up the coffin quickly. As the metal heated up, Issei began to sweat, but he was yelling in pain as he felt his body tear up from the inside. The lamps were emitted harmless radiation, but it was accelerating the process to minimize the pain for Issei. After a full minute of excruciating pain, the coffin opened up and Issei was panting. Issei was no longer a chubby boy, but turned into a very strong and muscular man. His pecs were much larger, and there was a 6-pack as well. His arms were well toned as well as his legs, and he looked so much younger as well. He just used science to make his body stronger. After a few minutes of resting, Issei walked out of the coffin and his stomach roared in pain. He was starving. Running off to the kitchen, Issei began to raid the fridge of 6 eggs, 10 slices of bacon, 2 pieces of toast, a humongous cup of orange juice and an apple. As he began to eat his meal after cooking it, Drake finally made an appearance. You actually did it, you crazy bastard. I'm not crazy, my mother had me tested. No more TV for you. Issei grinned as he munched on some toast. Like my parents, I am also smart, and I can do science stuff. I'm pretty sure saying science stuff isn't something smart people say. Funny. So, what do you think? I am still analyzing your body, but I am absolutely amazed. This is the first time this happened, so I am in shock. But after what I have currently analyzed, you have grown so much stronger that you can wield my power with ease. Great job. Thanks. I am ready for the rating game. Damn right. Saturday game, and Issei walked through the magic circle. Once he arrived, he quickly cast his own magic, which disappeared in an instant. He smirked as he knew that what he cast already took effect. The rating game location was a copy of Ko Academy, but only the school building and grounds. There was also the old school building. However, surrounding the school on all sides was a dense forest. There was 2 large lakes on the east and west of the school, with a river that ran in a circle along the entire field. Issei smiled as he knew that this was a dream come true. The field itself was perfect for Issei and his peerage, and he knew now that victory was assured. Within a private viewing room, Rias and her peerage, accompanied by her brother, father and Grafia, all looked at the screens. Rias scratched her head and looked at the left screens. Why are all screens involving Issei and his peerage completely blacked out? She asked. I do not know, but the system detects no cheating. It's probably a bug or something. If Issei decided to cheat, the system would recognize it and he would have to forfeit. Even if he affected the system like this, it's not giving him an advantage in the game, so it doesn't matter, I suppose. Grafia said. Ria sighed and took a seat on a chair next to her brother, worry plastered all over her face. Today was the day she might lose everything. Greetings, everyone. I am Grafia and I will be the arbiter for this match. In the old school building, Issei Hyoudou and his peerage, and located in the mountains in the far north, Riser and his peerage. He is in the cave system. This is a randomly generated rating game field and one of our largest. Due to the size of this map, we have limited the game to 6 hours. Please do your best. Start. Spoke a random computer-generated voice. Issei watched as his raptors dashed like the devil was on their heel, right into the forest to the west. He smiled and watched as the Spino headed into the east, obviously going for the water. While the Spino operated equally on land, the Spino knew in the water, he had an advantage over opponents. Issei was currently walking calmly to the school, taking his time. The Rex was in the east forest as well but was waiting on the edge to make his move. Issei leaned on against the brick of the gym, waiting for his first opponent, hoping it was Isabella. He did promise her a good fist fight, despite Issei not having any combat experience, but he could fight it out in a brawl. He has brawled before. One of Riser's pawns retired, Grafia said. Issei smiled as he knew that a raptor just took one out. Up in the viewing room, everyone jumped as they watched from the perspective of one of the pawns from Riser. Coming out of the bush was a full of teeth and claws, and it just took out a pawn in a second. It was over so quickly, they didn't even see much of what happened. What was that? xDoug asked. It was so fast I don't know. Ria said, shocked. Akino, Kiba and Kaneko were sitting on a couch. Riser blinked in surprise at hearing this, and he growled. Everyone deploy. Riser expects to crush this puny commoner with ease. He has only 6 pieces. This will be easy. Crush him, Riser demanded. With that, everyone was deployed. 2 bishops, 1 rook, 1 queen, and 4 pawns have been deployed. One of Riser's rooks retired. Issei looked up and around. Was that Isabella? I hope not. In the viewing room, they watched as the rook was walking along the riverbed. It was a girl in a Chinese dress. There was a shadow moving closer in the water, but none of them paid any attention to it. A large splash of water covered the camera so they couldn't see anything. In the 2 seconds it occurred, the rook was gone and defeated. All they could see was blood appeared in the water. What is going on? Why are we unable to see what's happening? Rias asked, shocked. xDoug was calm, but he was now smiling. So, this is the power of Issei's peerage. I do wonder what he had made into his servants. It's great to see him again, and especially in this way. Issei sighed. He was bored but knew better than to move too far away from his base. It was then he heard a voice. So, you've been waiting long? Isabella asked. Issei turned his head and looked at Isabella, who was crossing the field with Ravel. Yeah, it's been boring. My servants are having fun with your comrades. I can see that. I am interested to see what you have in store. Isabella said, only to stop 10 feet away. What are you? She asked, shocked. Me? I am a devil, Issei said, removing his shirt and showing off his powerful muscles. Up in the viewing room, Rias and her peerage all stood up in shock at seeing Issei. It was then the camera covered Issei was uncovered and they watched. What's the matter, Rias? There is no way that is possible. Issei did not have a body like that 5 days ago, Rias said, unable to comprehend what was going on. xDoug looked over and saw the other members were equally shocked. With this in mind, xDoug was now intrigued. How did you gain a body like that in a day? Simple. My parents were geneticists. They have a lab within the city, one of their earliest laboratories. Using what they had in the lab and running many tests, I have created a serum that turned me into what you see before you, Issei said, grinning as he got into a fight stance. 4 of Riser's pawns retired. In the viewing room, Rias was only watching the camera on Issei, but in her peripheral vision she watched as 4 brown blurs due to speed take out 4 pawns within seconds. She turned and rewinded the cameras, everyone watching in shock as in one camera, they saw reptilian eyes and a large foot-long claw. That was the only thing they could make out. Either give up now, or I will have to take you down myself and show you what kind of power I have, Issei said, looking at Riser, who was flying with 2 wings of fire. I will never surrender. I will scorch all of your servants, and you into dust. Riser roared as he threw a humongous fireball at Issei, who quickly dashed away. Get the 2 girls and move out of the way, Issei said to his friends. The dinos quickly snatched the two Gersel and placed them on their backs, moving a few yards away. Issei quickly dodged another fireball as Riser was just throwing them wildly. He was laughing maniacally. Issei tossed up a large barrier around the dinos and then threw a green magic circle at the barrier, which strengthened it. Turning to Riser, who began to cover himself in flame, ready to do another firebird attack, Issei summoned a large green magic circle in the sky. Riser flew from the sky and ran parallel on the ground, heading to burn Issei. Issei stood his ground and waited. With Riser finally in position, a humongous shock wave appeared from the magic circle and struck Riser in the back and sent him into the ground. The shock wave struck the ground. Dirt and rock flew up into the air as the shock wave destroyed the earth in its path, before it stopped and reversed itself and went back into the sky, sending dirt and rock flying in the air. With the dirt clear, the devastation was evident. There was a gash 50 yards in length with a good 20 yards in width with 30 yards in depth. Issei's show of power was immense. xDoug was sitting down, but he clenched his seat. So this is what you meant by his power being amazing. I can sense it from here. Issei is a super devil and isn't even using his full power. I know he is on my level. Riser began to reform his body as his entire body was pulverized into nothing from the massive shock wave. Issei had two magic circles, one on each palm, and was acting like he was going to shoot a Kamehameha. Between the two magic circles, everyone was able to see that the shock wave that appeared was being condensed into a small ball, so its destructive power was going to be so absolute, Riser might die. With wide eyes, Ravel flew out of the barrier and put herself in between Riser, who was panting and on his knees, and Issei, who was about to shoot his magic. Don't hurt him. Out of the way, little girl, unless you want to be next. He won't give up unless I defeat him. Now move. No. He lost. He lost when he challenged you. Please don't hurt him. It was then the raiding game field disappeared, with the servants disappearing into particles, but Issei was now falling through the sky. His eyes were wide as he was in the underworld, falling to the ground at a rapid pace. Issei was caught by Rias, who held him to her chest. Issei, you saved me. I told you I would, Issei said, hugging Rias tightly with his head buried in her nice chest. Rias smiled and quickly at Issei giving him his first, and her own. Issei had wide eyes at this and fell limp, unable to respond in any other way. Upon arriving on the ground, xDoug, Graphia, Rias, Aquino, Kiba, Kaneko, and Isabella all surrounded Issei. They began to hammer him with questions and began to congratulate him, that he began to get overwhelmed. Like a coward, he quickly disappeared in a magic circle heading home. Upon arriving in the large field, xDoug let out a loud sigh. Seriously? Even after winning and getting it from your girlfriend, you still ran like a coward. Did you seriously just turn a great moment into this? What can I say? I know how to make an entrance. That was an exit, and you are terrible. Sunday morning came around and Issei awoke at about 7 in the morning. He got up in his underwear, scratched his ass and went downstairs for breakfast. With a bowl of cereal before him and him gently prodding it, xDoug decided to speak up as Issei was still waking up. So, what is the plan today, kid? Dunno. xDoug could hear how tired he sounded even in his thoughts. xDoug chuckled and decided to help him by activating his power. Boost X3. Ah, thanks xDoug. No problem, kid. Now, what do you plan for the day? What's with the sudden intrigue in my day? Issei asked, this time out loud. Because you got work to do. It's Sunday. No, I don't. You are an idiot, and I will not allow you to continue being stupid like this. You are going to visit Rias and her group today and have that ING reunion that you screwed up with you running away. That's not work. Kid, you're right, xDoug said. He was going to reply with his own wisdom, but decided to just agree with Issei and let Issei see how much work he has in for him today. Issei grinned at his win over the dragon and ate his cereal in silence before heading to the shower. He knew that after the raiding game, he was a bit funky. With the shower completed in 10 minutes of water wasting and soul searching, Issei was walking through the town in a black t-shirt that had a giant snake on it with black shorts. Issei made his way to the old schoolhouse and entered, heading towards the room that Kaneko showed him before. He opened the door quickly and let out a big smile. Hi honey, I'm home. Issei sang out to the room. It was like time froze. Issei was stiff as a board and his eyes were wide. In the room was Aquino, Rias and Kaneko, all in various states of undress. They were getting dressed into some casual clothes for Sunday, but Issei caught them while they were changing. With Issei appearing out of the blue, the three girls stopped changing. Rias was currently wearing only her black lace bra and black lace panties, both of which did very little covering up. It was legal, but only barely. She was preparing to put on a red frilly dress that would look great on her, and it wouldn't reveal much of anything. Not that it did anything to hide the fact that she had fantastic curves and a great chest. Akino was completely, and Issei could see just how trim she was down there. She wasn't shaven, but there was a small strip of curly black hair that led to the honey pot that even Winnie wouldn't only be dipping his paws into. She was putting on a black kimono, which was not revealing either, but again, with her body tight, that did nothing to hide the fact she was deliciously attractive. Kaneko was only wearing her white cat print panties, making her adorable. She had a flat chest, but Issei liked them too as were, and since it was Kaneko, they fit her so well. She was putting on a white t-shirt with a cat face on it, and a small pair of white shorts that would hug her tight rump just right. Time unfroze and the three girls continued to get dressed, not caring at all about the fact Issei saw them in various states of undress. Issei's eyes were so bug-eyed that there was an exterminator outside the window ready to kill Issei for being a pest. When Issei was able to find his jaw from the floor, he quickly closed his eyes and began to stutter. "I am so sorry. I forgot to knock," Issei stated, trying to apologize, but alas, since he got the complete eyeful of the three women, his apology shouldn't have meant much, but the three girls enjoyed it nonetheless, as he at least tried to be more of a gentleman than a horny teenager. Akino chuckled behind her head. Era Issei. You saw me in quite a predicament. You will take responsibility, won't you? If you tell anyone about what you saw, I'll kill you," spoke the white-haired female, Kaneko. "Issei, you didn't tell us you were coming over. We would have loved to be dressed up for you," Ria said, smiling sweetly. "Well, I thought I would make a surprise entrance," Issei said, smiling timidly while rubbing the back of his neck. "It sure was a surprise for you, wasn't it?" Akino said, giggling. "Oh, I didn't see a thing," Issei said, trying to deny that he was surprised. He was trying to have them not hate him for getting quite the show. Era, quite the slip up there, Issei. Such a naughty boy. I am not. Stop teasing me. Teasing you? Why would I be teasing you? I'm only stating the facts," Akino said, acting coy. "You saw me, this would make you a naughty boy," Akino said, now licking her as she began to approach her prey. "Issei needs a punishment for being such a bad boy." Issei began to backpedal from Akino's advancement, but by doing so he was actually moving away from the door and into the room more. Rias, grinning evilly as well, approached Issei from another direction. "Issei saw me when I was such a mess. I'm so embarrassed." "I hope you will take responsibility," Rias said, acting all hurt and shy. "I didn't mean to see you like that. I swear. It wasn't on purpose," Issei said, still backpedaling as he was trying to defend himself. He was backpedaling to one of the couches, unaware of what was behind him. Akino looked at Rias and put out her lower lip like a pout. Akino was so good at acting all hurt like a maiden. "Rias, he saw me so much more of a state. He should be the one to marry me only. Why not marry us both? He has to take responsibility," Rias said, looking at Akino with sadness, also able to play this game. "And marriage? I am too young for this, but you have to take responsibility for seeing us, it's only proper. You wouldn't be a coward, would you, and not take responsibility like a man, right?" Akino asked, a predatory look in her eyes. Despite her face acting all shy and sad, she was still approaching from the left while Rias was coming from the right, both of their walks slow like a spider who knows that the fly is caught in their trap. The back of Issei's legs struck the couch and he fell downwards, only for his head to land into the softest pillows he has ever laid his head upon. Looking up, he saw the pretty face of Kaneko. "Take responsibility." "No! Not you too!" Issei cried out. "You girls are still so evil!" he yelled out to the world. 10 minutes later, Issei was sitting on a couch with a cup of tea in his hands while Akino and Rias were standing up before him, glaring at him. "It's time you talked," Rias said, hands on her hips as she demanded an explanation. "Yes, it's time we heard where you have been. We were worried sick." Issei gulped and looked up at the two older females who were acting like moms scolding their children who were late from school. "Well, I was hiding," Issei said a bit timidly. The two girls' faces softened at this, and they looked at him concerned. "That's right, you lost your parents. What happened that night, Issei?" Issei turned serious and angry. He looked at the floor and clenched his fists. "Fallen angels attacked my home and killed my mother and father while I was playing with my friends. Before they died, they told me to run and I heard them scream as they were exterminated. My raptors and my Spinos stayed back and slaughtered 4 of the 5 that came, but 1 escaped. I was taken into a forest on top of a mountain, northwest of the city, and from there I recovered. With the help of my friends, I trained in my magic and well, here I am." Ria smiled a bit, and a tear fell down her face. She quickly pulled Issei into her chest and hugged him tight. Oh Issei, I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Issei said, which was muffled by her. Still, are you alright? I am fine. I am here now and I am happy with my life. I found my old friends again and I don't want to be away from you guys ever again. Oh Issei, Ria said, smiling happily as she hugged him tightly. It was then Akino yanked Issei away into her chest, hugging her tightly. Era, don't forget about my Issei. We got a lot of catching up to do. We haven't played in so long, Akino said, putting emphasis in the word played. Issei's eyes grew wide and fear entered his soul while cold shivers were sent down his spine. Akino was quite the sadist back then, and while he knew she would never purposely hurt him, she still hurt him slightly and made his life hell. Not that it was a bad thing. Issei felt a small weight on his right leg, so he pried himself away from Akino's ample bosom and looked down. Kaneko was hugging him tightly while looking up at him. Issei gave Kaneko a big smile. It was lonely without you, Kaneko said, smiling at Issei. I've missed you too, Issei replied, picking up Kaneko and giving her a tight hug which was reciprocated. Akino and Rias both hugged Issei too, and it turned into a massive group hug which left Issei breathless. Well, it seems everyone is getting along, said a voice. It was then xDoug appeared through the magic circle. Brother! What are you doing here? Why else would I be here for? It's for Issei. It's good to see you again, xDoug, Issei said, not showing him respect like the other people would to the great Devil King. It was more of the respect for a friend. xDoug smiled happily. As it is you, Issei. I can see you are quite healthy for being away from us for such a long time. I took care of myself. I can still see you are the Devil King. I hope you are doing well with Grafia. Of course. So, Rias, I told you 2 years ago what my original plan was with Issei. Rias's eyes grew wide in shock. Brother, he has too many, xDoug chuckled. That's true, but we could easily just switch it around, yes? Well, yeah, but wouldn't that ruin everything? xDoug scratched his head and shook it as well. I don't think so. Issei was confused, so he spoke up. xDoug, please tell me what is going on. Stop talking like I shouldn't know. This isn't some comedy anime, you know. xDoug laughed a bit and nodded. Alright. Well, when your parents first came to me with this playdate thing, we watched you get along with my dear sister and her servants. Well, your parents and I actually wanted you to actually marry Rias since you were getting along very well with my sister. I do know about the cheeky you gave each other back then. With saying this, both Issei, Akino, Rias and Kaneko were red-faced. It was obvious that the yes Issei got was gotten from the other two and he gave them yes as well. Marriage, but we don't like each other like that. xDoug chuckled and waved his hand. No worries, it's decided that marriage can wait for a long time. Anyways, we wanted you to join her peerage as well as her servant. Oh, that wouldn't have been so bad, Issei admitted, scratching the back of his head. My thoughts exactly. Well, with the way things are now it can happen and I don't think you would want to anymore. Issei shook his head. You're right. I can't bear to part with my friends. So, I was thinking she could join your peerage. And my peerage. Why would she do that? She would lose her name. Come now, Issei, we both know that Rias would be the real king. Her name wouldn't be sullied and it wouldn't be strengthened. Wait, I would be the king. I have the peace, Issei said, a bit offended. Ignoring his pleas, xDoug continued. So Rias, would you join him? I would have to talk with Akino, Kiba and Kaneko. Actually, I'm all for it, Kiba said, coming through the double doors now. Akino giggled. Of course I would. I would love to. Sounds like a lot of fun, Akino said before looking at Issei with the eyes of a predator. I could be such a good servant to Issei, Akino said, putting a seductive emphasis on the word servant which got Issei to gulp in fear and arousal. I'd be okay with it. Nothing would change, Kaneko said. Rias smiled and nodded at xDoug. Then I am okay with it. As Kaneko said, nothing would really change. Excellent. Alright, I will get everything handled paperwork-wise and get it noted in the devil world. Farewell, xDoug said. All of this was done with Issei unable to respond. The girls and Kiba all turned to Issei, who began to back away. Hey, now I never agreed to this, shouldn't I get a say in this? No, spoke the 3 girls at once. It was all simultaneously. Kiba just smiled and waved. Issei was defeated by the collective power of the females and gave in. 20 minutes later, Issei had given Kaneko his rook, Akino and Rias 2 pawns and Kiba a knight. With this done, Issei had 1 knight and 2 pawns remaining as pieces. Issei's life as he knew it was going to change, and he had no control over anything. Issei was walking with his new servants, though it didn't feel like it. Rias was leading the pack, acting like the true noble king she was. She was a princess after all, so with Issei being the official king, though he knew deep down that it was only for the paperwork, he had only 4 pawns and 1 knight remaining to fill up his peerage. Rias was walking towards Issei's house in the mountains once he told them where he was living. Everyone, minus Issei, were excited to see where Issei was living. They would get to meet the dinosaurs, see where he got his muscles at in the lab, and what kind of things his parents used to do. Not even Issei knew what they were doing, but he didn't really go and look for such data. He had no interest in following his parents' footsteps and instead only making his own path. He would still use the lab but just go in a different direction. Perhaps it would be only for selfish uses, but that was okay. Issei didn't know what his plans were for his life, but he was taking it one step at a time for the moment. I can't wait to see what my new servants are like, Rias said with a grin. Akino looked at Rias as she was walking alongside her. I as well. It would be interesting to see what new playtoys I could have. Rias chuckled. I thought Issei was your only playtoy. The more the merrier is the saying, right? Akino giggled out before looking behind as Issei with a predatory smile. She licked her top lip. Don't worry, Issei, you are my favorite plaything. Joy. Issei deadpanned. Issei had given up already. He knew that he was only the king on the paperwork, but everyone would know that Rias was the boss of the house. Issei did wonder why the females of the Gremry house were the ones in control, and now he figured it out. Grafia owned Surzex and then Alana owned her husband. Now he was owned and he was only friends with Rias. At least he had his dinosaur friends to think of him as the true king. Upon arriving at the house, Issei opened up the doors and led the group inside, taking them to the back where the large glass dome was at. When he pressed the button for the large metal doors to slide open, Rias and the others pushed past him into the humid tropical rain forest. They were able to see a large path that obviously led to the center, where there was most likely a clearing. They also could hear running water, including a waterfall. They heard the chirps and croaks of other animals, but could not hear the dinosaurs. Issei walked through the path and arrived at the clearing with his friends. When he heard the stomps, the Rex appeared from the forest with the raptors by his feet, where the Spino came from the river. They all looked at Issei, then Rias and the others. Issei cleared his throat. So, it seems that we have gotten more people into my peerage. Rias, Akino, Kiba and Kaneko are all my servants now, Issei said with a smile. So, treat them kindly. It only took 10 seconds, but Issei watched as each and every one of the dinosaurs knelt before Rias, as servants to a king. Issei's eyes went wide in shock. You're all traitors! Issei exclaimed. His dinosaurs have betrayed him. It was then the Alpha Raptor looked back and grinned at Issei, showing that the dinos were only ing with him. Issei narrowed his eyes as threatened the creature with his eyes only for the raptor to look away as Rias and the gang were petting the creatures on their heads. While they are so well behaved, Rias said. Are they potty trained? Akino teased. A snort from the large Rex knocked her on her, but this didn't hurt her. In fact, it only made her put on a trademark predatory grin, looking at the large dinosaur. She was going to have to push the big monstrous creature. After 20 minutes of the introductions, Issei went back into the main building and into the kitchen. He wanted to get a drink from dealing with his traitorous companions. It was then Rias appeared from behind and chuckled. You're making that wrong, Rias said sweetly, pressing her chest to his back and taking his hands into her own, where she emptied the cup and began to show Issei how to make the tea properly. Issei blushed at the intimate contact, but somehow felt his mancard was at stake because this was something a man should be doing to a female. It was then a hologram appeared at the dining room table and a sweet voice was heard. Excuse me, is Rias here? Oh, Lady Phoenix, how do you do? Rias said with a dignified smile and a small bow. I am quite well. Yourself? Wonderful, actually. So, what is the honor of your visit? I would like to offer a trade, Lady Phoenix said with a smile. Issei looked over and noticed that the girl looked like an older Revel. Down to even the eye color. I do apologize, but I am no longer a king, Rias said, being honest. Oh, I am well aware of this fact, but you still control the pieces. So, I would like to trade you 2 pawns for 2 of my own. Issei rolled his eyes at his luck. Oh, who might they be? My daughter and Isabella. With Revel wanting out of her brother's peerage, Isabella decided to follow to protect Revel. That was the nature of their relationship long ago anyway. I don't see why not. I am well aware that Revel doesn't fight, but having a rook like Isabella would be a nice addition. Yes, my thoughts exactly. Though I do have to ask, why did you ask us? It was because my dear daughter asked to be part of Issei's peerage, she said sweetly. You could hear in the background a loud M-O-O-M, which Rias and Ravel's mother giggled at. Issei sighed and continued to sip his tea while staying out of view. Oh, is Issei there? Yes. Issei, come great Lady Phoenix. Issei ducked behind the counters, hiding from Rias's vision too. Issei. Rias scolded. No response. Rias looked at Ravel's mother and gave her an apologetic smile. Hold on one moment. Rias got up and went behind the counter, and a few seconds later, Issei was shoved into the seat and was rubbing his ear after saying ow. Hello? Hello there. So you would be the famous young man who has a peerage of extinct reptiles who defeated a phoenix easily. Why yes. It's an honor to meet you. So will you take Ravel in? Not like I have a choice. Rias is controlling my entire peerage now. I meant as a man, would you? I want you to look after my daughter and keep weird pests away from her. You am I guess so. Issei said, scratching his head. With a clap of her hands, Ravel's mother gave a big smile. Wonderful. They are already at your doorstep. Ding dong. Issei blinked, and when he turned around to accuse Ravel's mother, she was gone. Issei narrowed his eyes and began to walk to the front door. It seemed Ravel's mother knew that Issei would take Ravel, and so she sent them ahead of time. When Issei opened the door, he was greeted by the sight of Ravel with her arms crossed over her chest and Isabella with an apologetic look on her face. About time, Ravel said, acting like a tsundere. We were standing here forever. It's a big house. Takes a while to cross over. Should have ran. Ravel said, walking in past Issei, who was pushed out the way by the little girl. Issei turned to Isabella, who chuckled. I'm sorry about that. She doesn't hate you. It's hard to tell, but I know. Issei said with a sigh. May I come in? Might as well. The person you are escorting decided to push her way inside. Issei said with a chuckle, walking into the house with Isabella. Issei took Isabella and Ravel into the large glass dome, letting the dinosaurs meet up with the two new peerage additions. The girls looked up at the large dinosaurs, as even the raptors were at least 10 feet tall. Big. Isabella said. That's what she said? Issei said quickly. Rias smacked him in the back of the head for the comment. Issei rubbed his head, then coughed, fiddling through his pocket for his pieces. It was then he noticed that they were gone, but Rias had them in her hand. Issei blinked and looked confused, only to growl a bit. Rias had taken his pieces too, not even letting him have the privilege of putting the pieces into the people he was going to take in. It shouldn't even be possible to have someone else do it, but for some reason, Rias was able to. Issei chalked it up to the karma gods. It was his punishment for being away from the girls for so long. Issei said it and walked out of the dome, letting Rias handle the peerage while he went out on the town. He had enough of the shenanigans of his life, so he decided to go attend a movie. There was a movie coming out that he wanted to see for the longest time. It was a monster movie about a large reptilian creature like 400 feet tall, with spines out of his back. He also could shoot a large radiation heat beam from his. It looked awesome. As Issei was making his way to the movie theater, his name was called out, and he froze up in fear. Hey Issei! Issei! It's been so long. Issei turned around slowly, and his fears were met. His oldest childhood friend was there, though he only knew her for a few months before she moved off to another country. Irina Hyoudou. He quickly put on a confused look. My name is Nick. Not Issei, you have the wrong person. Irina was with another girl who had blue hair with a green fringe. She decided to speak up. You are Japanese, not American, the girl said, narrowing her eyes in anger. They were exorcists and could tell he was a devil. Irina ran over to Issei and quickly gave him a big hug, smothering him with her awesome hyperness. Issei was shivering in fear from the female, and when he was released he quickly backed away. Well, I gotta go, Issei said, walking away quickly. He was stopped by the other girl who stood in front of him. We have business to speak of with you and your master, so you aren't getting away from us. Why would you run away from me? Didn't you miss me? You tortured me every week, Issei accused. What? You don't remember? I remember that I bought you ice cream every Monday and then you took me to the mall. Well, yeah, I remember that. So many shoes, Issei said, holding his head like it was in pain. Irina looked confused and looked at him weirdly but giggled anyway. You're so silly, Issei, Irina said, taking his arm into her own before escorting him up the mountain to his home. Issei looked behind him at the movie theater and whined, as he really wanted to see that movie. Upon arriving back at home, the two girls were surrounded by so many devils that it was quite scary. So, you wanted to speak with me? Rias asked. Yes, we are here on business, and we want you to stay out of it. Zenobia put it bluntly. I see. What business do you have here? That is none of your business. Zenobia! We are trying to make nice with these devils. Now be nice. I am only stating facts. You make it so difficult sometimes. Irina said before looking at Rias. Kokabile and Valper Galilei has stolen a lot of our Excalibur from our churches, and you want to fight him alone? Rias asked, confused. You're going to die. We're well aware of our chances. Zenobia said. You both are idiots. I thought you were smarter than this, Irina. Issei said, crossing his arms and looking at his old friend/tormentor. I have a job to do. Irina defended. Idiot. All right, I will offer my help then. Issei said. Rias shook her head. We can't do that, Issei. It could cause a war. How? We aren't attacking the angels, just helping them. We would be fighting against Kokabile, and they aren't? They will cause a war if they don't, and Kokabile is a warmonger. That guy is trying to start a war. Zenobia nodded. This is true, but we don't need help from devils. Zenobia said with a glare. Especially one who is afraid to go shopping. Excuse me? Issei challenged, glaring at her. You heard me. We don't need cowardly devil scum like you on our side. Alright, I think it's time we play a game to see how many hits does it take to get to the center of an exorcist. Issei said, clenching his fists. Zenobia stared at him and grinned, ready to fight. Issei turned and looked around the room for a moment, only to see Kiba staring murderously at Zenobia, but it was more at the swords. It was then Irina spoke up. Oh, I remember something else that the church told us. Kokabile also was responsible for the death of a family of devil researchers like 7 years ago. Issei's eyes went wide, which included all of the devils in the room including Kiba. Issei clenched his fists extremely hard. Rias, Issei said, seething. Rias sighed and nodded. I can't stop you even if I say it's a bad idea. Plus I'm angry too. Akino giggled and licked her finger. I think it sounds like fun bringing the pain to a leader class. Irina and Zenobia looked confused. Issei, what are you talking about? When we were kids, Irina, you thought I was a human. That's wrong. I was with my family on a business trip and I met you in a park. I asked my father if I could stay longer, so we stayed in the human realm for longer. Irina, I was always a devil. Oh, but I don't understand. I'm not finished. Irina, the researcher family that Kokabile had killed, that was my family. Issei said, sadness entering his eyes. He had my mother and father killed and my parents' work burned to the ground. Only I survived. Oh, Issei. Irina said, jumping up and giving Issei a big hug, who gave it back. So, now that I know, I will be taking the fight to Kokabile and I will end his life. I will squeeze the life out of him with my own 2 hands, Issei said, walking out of the dining room to the glass dome, obviously to make his plans. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the xDoug-Dimmadome-x for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.